Here we are, 90 degrees in the shade in Palm Springs. We're down here to do a little avenging with Mr. Patrick Macnee, John Steed of the Avengers, lately Dr. Watson to Christopher Lee's Sherlock Holmes. It's 90 degrees in the shade here, as I said, but he has an outside air conditioning. It's a very Hollywood thing to do, very movies. I'll be talking just a moment to Mr. Patrick Macnee. Then I'll write down my questions and ask them myself again later.
Fine.
All right. Are you rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay, tell me, why do you think after all these years the Avengers is still popular? There are other shows similar to it that aren't shown.
Well, basically, because it was the best. But more importantly, it was the first. And when the women came into it, Honor Blackman, Diana Rigg, and Linda Thorson, shortly after it started, I started it with a man. It was paralleled, really, the time of the beginnings of women's lib. If you take 1960 to 64, that's basically when it really started in the public sense. And these, in comic strip form, these women showed that you could get out of the house, out of the kitchen, and everything like that, come out and be in the mainstream. Well, now, as you know, women run banks, they run studios. I've been working for women more than men in the last 10, 20 years. And I find that very exciting, and I like to think in a trivial way, which basically we call the Avengers, it made the trivial important and the important trivial, that we helped women along the way to almost equal opportunity. Not, of course, if you're a welder and you're out there, and I see many women, I've seen them in the street here even yesterday, working with their hard hats just as hard as the men, and I bet you anything they don't get the same money. But quite apart from that, if you have Charlie Crichton and Donald Sutherland and hundreds of actors, producers, designers who went on, Ray Austin, to become some of the best directors, designers, and actors in the world. And they're all there. And the show had a formula which was based on these two people, me and the woman, relating a straight man to some of the most gorgeous, eccentric, highly talented people, funny people, giving of their best and enjoying it. And the show has really lasted, I think, the same way the Lucy show lasts, the way, I mean, there you get the cream, but many, many shows, Danny Thomas, all the famous people, Gary Marshall, all these people who would have been genuinely funny on the end of a pier outside in the street. Albert Finney started the English National Theatre by playing Tamburlaine on the street because the unions wouldn't let him in. If you get shows like that, of course they last. The thing now is, because of television, they last forever. Now, I would have had to have said, they would say, well, what did you used to do when you were an actor, Mr. Me? Well, I was on the stage, you know, in Sleuth. I played Broadway 16 months. Oh, did you? I didn't see. Because, of course, that's gone into the history, the 72, 73. But the Avengers, or anything that is good, stays because of television.
It's very interesting that you said about the fact that women, it touched a women's lib, because I know always the biggest fans of the Avengers have been women over the years, as I can see. The men like it too, but the interesting thing to me in it is Steed. Steed is the least sexist hero in the history of television, I think, because he doesn't defer to Mrs. Peel. I mean, yeah, Mrs. Peel. They're absolute equals, and I think that was a very important thing. Do you think Steed was that kind of person? Am I misreading it?
You mean, do you think Patrick Macnee was that type of person? Because I made the character up in the first place. Yes, completely. You see, to me, to be macho, I remember when Honor Blackman went and played Pussy Galore in the Bond film, she said, my goodness, Sean Connery, he's a man. I mean, I'm terribly sorry, Pat. I mean, I'm not remotely homosexual, and God knows, my darling wife now, Bubba, but I have had 2 wives before. I love women. On the other hand, I don't threaten them, no. And the Steve character never threatened them. He was a partner with them. Now, basically, women really do like genuine partnership in men. They don't like being thrown about and tossed out of trailers and run over by cars in the road, or drunken people coming back to them. Just because they're a man doesn't give them entitlement to enslave women. It should be equal. And it's a lovely balance. And I like to think that, quite consciously, incidentally, because I'd lived many years in the United States before I even started the Avengers, and worked with people on an equal level, much more than in England. But in England, you either had to come back and be a theatre, or known for that, or if you were in television, you had to be international. You had to be understood everywhere.
The basic question is, where did John Steed come from?
Well, from imagination. They had another character called, which was played by a wonderful actor called Ian Henry, and they needed a sort of mysterious sidekick, and I think they thought, oh, he's just the sort of shadow there. And in some way, I think my own experience throughout life, having been in Hollywood in all the 50s, done live television. See, there's a wonderful show on now done by David Lynch called On the Air, which a lot of people don't even understand. I do, because I was there doing live television. There's panic and a thing, and actually there, and you're being seen by 60 million people, there's no going back. And it's all based on that show beautifully. But that time made you ready for anything. Now, the whole point about the Avengers is that the man is ready for anything. He was cool before it was hip. And the most important thing about him was that I served throughout the whole of the Second World War on a motor torpedo boat. I was captain of this boat, and I was a first lieutenant at one time. And I mean, I saw a great deal of action. I saw a lot of death, destruction, and despair. And the only way, both during it and after it, to survive was to be what they call now cool. So I personified that in this Steed character. So he was cool not just in battle or with a gun, because he never carried a gun, or in any crisis situation, but he was cool in his relation to all forms of humanity. And consequently, he didn't try and intrude or top them. And that's why I think the show lasted for so long, because I was a catalyst.
It's such an interesting play off the cool man who's always in control against the woman in black leather who kicks other people around. You know, it's a very interesting match.
Well, the reason is that humanity, of course, males have been in authority for so many centuries that basically they are secure in their position, whereas women have not been. So the first thing they have to do is, in any revolution, is to kick a lot of people or bring the guillotine down or do things that hopefully put men in their place.
Did this, I mean, somebody once said that in the movie that was in England, it was called Q Planes, and over here, I don't know what it was called.
One of my favorites, yeah.
We had Ralph Richardson played a character who was a little like Steed. He had the brawly and the umbrella.
I took a lot of the externals from Sir Ralph because he was a great, great actor. And he had the ability, this wonderful insouciance and a feeling of being complete charge of everything. And he was a great, yes, I took an enormous amount from Q Planes. A lot of those films at that period that Olivia and Richardson did, and Conrad Veidt did, my most favourite film star of all time is Conrad Veidt. This was in the late 30s. Those films, I long for them to come out again and be seen, because they gave the qualities of personality at that time. That was the most important thing of all. You came on the screen and did it. And I find that about all those old films.
Over the years, why did the show change? You know, after there was a big, obviously, when they brought in Linda Thorson, she was very unlike Mrs. Steed and Mrs. Peel.
Well, Mrs. Peel, you see, Diana Rigg was a rather exceptional person in herself. It started with Honor Blackman, who was a considerable authority figure and very, very exciting, particularly when dressed in the black leather and everything, same way as Batwoman today. They overlook the fact that leather is, particularly when it's polished, is like a second skin, and if you put it on a woman's form, it's obviously very exciting. And it also gives a thing of dominance which appeals to the masochism in men. So consequently, any woman like that is exciting. You then get somebody soft and dear like Diana Rigg, but this wonderful actress who comes in, wears the same clothes, but is what people like to think they are themselves at home. They can put themselves, and they did, into Diana Rigg's position, and they think, my goodness, I could do that. And when she gets her hair back like that after having sort of slaughtered about 4 men and looks, oh, did I do that? My goodness, I must go back to the nursery. That's the combination which excites people.
And then Linda Thorson, she was yet another figure.
Well, she, of all, particularly in France, was the most popular of all the ladies, because her ability, of course, now she's wonderful, wonderful actress. She was very young and absolutely beautiful. And at the time, I took her very much for granted because I missed Diana. But in retrospect, and I'm seeing the shows now, a lot of them I never saw at the time because we were so busy. I think she was absolutely gorgeous and darling, and probably the most sexually exciting of all of them.
Since then, you've been a very busy actor, often in things that for some reason don't get released. You told me that at one time. You're the king of unreleased films. But still, the Avengers keeps coming back. Did you ever feel you were being haunted by the Avengers?
I made one terrible mistake. Well, interesting or blessed, yes. Well, blessed is the answer. No, directly I'd finished the Avengers, which was within about 3 months, I went and did a very successful play in Australia. And during that time, they rang me up from England and said, do you want to play in Sleuth, this new play Sleuth, in London? Tony Quayle is going to New York. And I said, oh, I don't think so. With that one simple phrase, I ruined my whole career, in my opinion. Because if I'd gone back to London when the Avengers were still really hot, played this immensely successful play Sleuth, which I then did play in New York for 16 months. But if I'd played it in London and then come to New York, my whole career would have been on a higher level. Now, I'm not saying that would have been better, or I might have been dead or run over by a bus. But I remember that as a time when I took a wrong turning.
So is that really the only central regret then, is not having done Sleuth?
Well, it's a big regret for not having followed up the success of the Avengers in something in the theatre which was considerable and hugely successful. But I have done in many, many ways since, and also my daughter, who is not well, lives out here, and a lot of good things in my life, I have a little grandson of 4, have all turned out beautifully. But I don't consider myself in the first rank of actors. Now, the reason I've been in all these strange movies is because I always say yes. Now, a lot of people, like Joe Dante, who grew up as sort of admirers of the Avengers, things like that, they look on me as a sort of cult figure. I've just done A Dream On, which is my favourite show on HBO, and it comes on August the 8th, and I portray a character who is beyond belief. And I find at this late stage, of being just over 70, very exciting that one has done something as mad as that.
I know why you were cast in that, by the way.
Why?
John Landis. He's the executive producer, and he's a big fan of the Avengers, too.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear. Well, it was very sweet of him to make Michael McKean the director, because not only is he a hugely talented man, I was in Spinal Tap with him, but he's a wonderful director. And that boy, Ben, is terrific.
Yes.
I see his wife's doing very well at the moment, Madeline Stone.
Oh, that is, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I just saw that film this week.
Yeah, it's The Last of the Mohicans, comes on very shortly.
She's also an unlawful entry.
Absolutely.
Very good
It's her year.
So, at this point, you look back and The Avengers is a blessing, because here you are, people still remember you. They come out, you're
And I love
highly
that.
recognizable. You know?
I know, I never dreamt that. Somebody came into my son's the other day. I was staying the night with him. I was up in town. I do a lot of these travel things for Laura Mackenzie, who I think is the best travel woman in the world on television. I do it when she goes to England or Australia places. But a man came to repair, no, he came in for the termites. And he was a young man, obviously 25, big man. He had a man behind him, big hat on. He looked at me as if I'd seen a ghost. Well, I mean, I was looking like I am now. And it really delights me, the fact that people, yes, do remember me sort of in perpetuity. And so if you balance things against lost opportunities, and I didn't play Hamlet and how I wish I'd been at the National, and things like that, or Sleuth earlier, the balance of the Avengers is so strong because of its audience appreciation that, yes, I'm proud to be part of it.
Well, I think that'd probably be enough footage for the French people, but could you say something to them?
I think I should.
Canal, yes. It's on Canal Jimmy.
Canal, how do you spell Jimmy?
It's J-I-M-M-Y, like the James.
Oh, Jimmy.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that a strange name for you?
What more do you want me to
Just say something like, say who you are, and who you played in the Avengers, and welcome to Canal Jimmy, something like that.
À Canal Jimmy, c'est Patrick Macnee. Il y a mon séries de TV, il nomme Chapeau, Melon et boîte de cuir. C'est un amusant titre, pardon en français, mais je veux dire...
Let's do it again after that thing goes by.
Playing it by unfortunately.